Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we have an important update on a winter storm that'll be impacting part of the United States today into tomorrow. And we'll also be talking about the severe weather threat that's ongoing right now that'll bring a few tornadoes throughout the afternoon across parts of the United States. I'll be giving you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast. And let's hop right into what's happening here with this very large storm across the East Coast of the United States. And right now our low pressure system is centered all the way back up here into Canada, and this storm, by the way, is massive. Obviously you can see on the infrared imagery all the cloud cover stretching from Canada all the way back down even into Mexico. Fun fact, this storm goes all the way up into Greenland, down into Mexico. Again, this is a massive storm that we're talking about, but obviously one of the more impactful things that's going to be happening here in the United States will be the threat for some snowfall. Upwards of 12 inches of snow will be possible tonight into tomorrow morning in parts of the United States. Additionally, we're watching for some severe weather down in the southeast United States. With that being said, the agenda for today's forecast is that we're going to begin talking about that winter storm threat, additionally how much snow you'll see and when you'll see it today into tomorrow, and as well as the very high wind speeds that are expected across the East Coast tomorrow morning that will lead to some power outages. Additionally, we'll talk about the rainfall totals, which could lead to some flooding, and then lastly we'll talk about that severe weather potential. Now, I did want to mention this is how large this storm is. There are two low pressure systems associated with this, so technically there's technically two storms here, but notice the low pressure system area is bringing precipitation from Greenland back into Mexico. Again, this is one of the largest areas that I've seen of rainfall, basically almost all connected across ever. I mean, this is again a huge storm that we're talking about. So just for perspective, again, it's a very large storm, and obviously that's why we saw severe weather yesterday, and obviously a lot more impacts to come for today. Now, here are the watches and warnings in the Northeast today. We have some winter weather advisories in effect in those purple boxes. Includes parts of upstate New York, even goes back down into West Virginia near the Appalachian Mountains, and also in parts of Northern Virginia. We do have winter storm warnings in effect in those pink boxes, including much of upstate New York, back even closer to areas near Albany and then into Vermont, and as well as up in northern New Hampshire. Green boxes, that's representing your flood watches. That's the area that I'm most concerned about for a flooding risk for today and as well as into tomorrow. Now, one thing that we need to watch for closely over the next 24 hours is the temperatures. This is really going to give us more of an indication of how much snow you'll see here in the Northeast over the next 24 hours. And notice the below freezing temperatures won't really arrive for most of the Northeast until overnight tonight. So a lot of the snowfall that we're going to see is going to be late tonight into tomorrow morning, and that's when we're really going to see a lot of the accumulation. But even notice then, not everyone is going to go below freezing. So even if you see some snow, it might not accumulate in your location unless it's on like an elevated surface like a rooftop or something like that, or maybe grass. But overall, I mean, temperatures are going to be really around 30 to 32 degrees. So really the main area that I would expect more of a significant amount of snowfall accumulation would be right in here, and as well as right back in here. Those are the two main areas. But obviously, granted, most of the snowfall is going to be falling right in this area. So kind of give you an idea here that we're going to probably see most of the accumulation across much of eastern New York and as well as upstate New York. Now, here's the future radar. We'll begin with the mid-Atlantic, then go to the Northeast, and then go to the Midwest. This is what we're looking at for this afternoon. Overall, mostly showers and even some thunderstorms on the East Coast. This could cause some severe weather, including a few tornadoes and as well as damaging wind gusts. But snow will begin to transition late this afternoon in the Appalachian Mountains. This will lead to some early accumulations there. Then once we go into the evening hours, snow will start to transition further to the north and closer to the surface across parts of New York and as well as Pennsylvania. By the time we go into the overnight hours, snow continues to fall across much of Virginia and then back into the Northeast. And once we go into tomorrow morning, a lot of the snowfall will start to move out. We'll get some brief transition into flurries across Washington, D.C., maybe some light snowfall, and maybe even close to New York City. I wouldn't rule out a couple of snowflakes. And then lake effect snow will be a possibility across parts of Pennsylvania as we go into tomorrow afternoon, which will lead to additional accumulation. Here's what we're talking about with wind gusts. Again, really high wind speeds expected tomorrow across the East Coast. We are talking about the potential for 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts in eastern North Carolina and eastern Virginia, and also back up closer to Cape Cod. We could get upwards of 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts tomorrow and during the late morning hours. So again, if you have any plants outside, anything that can blow away like Christmas decorations, it might be a good idea to take those down. It's going to be very windy tomorrow. Power outage is definitely a concern across those areas. Now, in terms of the snowfall totals, the highest amount of snow will fall again the further north you go, but even in some of the Appalachian Mountains, we'll get a good coating to a few inches of snow, and then back up closer to Washington, D.C. I don't know if we're really going to see much accumulation there, but at least around a coating in some of the elevated surfaces possible. And then back over to New York, that is the area that I think we'll see a lot more snowfall. And let's talk more about the Northeast here. This is the future radar for today. Again, notice mostly rain through about 6 o'clock this evening. We will begin to transition to snow around about 7 to 8 o'clock in upstate New York, and then eventually further down to the south. Notice a lot of this will be around light to moderate snow here in central and eastern New York, and not really going to get too heavy. By the time we go overnight tonight, it might get a little bit heavier, especially in eastern New York, but keep in mind temperatures will likely still be above freezing in parts of eastern New York, so even if you transition into more of a mixture of rain and snow, you might not necessarily see accumulation. Once we go into tomorrow morning, snow will continue. It will become much lighter across New York. Snow will ramp up across Vermont and New Hampshire with heavier amounts of snow falling there, and by around lunchtime tomorrow, this low pressure system moves off to the north. Lake effect snow begins back over across the lakes, and then eventually as we go into the afternoon and evening hours, that lake effect snow will continue near Lake Erie, and eventually as we go overnight into Tuesday morning, most of that lake effect snow will wind down. So in terms of accumulation, well, again, there's going to be a good amount of snow, but this I think is a bit of an overestimate. I don't think we're going to see nearly as much snow, especially with the fact that temperatures will still be a little bit above freezing in some of these areas. These snowfall totals might be a bit lower overall. But back up to the north, a good 8 to 12 inches of snow is entirely possible across parts of northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, and back into parts of Maine. Parts of New York as well will see between about 3 to 6 inches of snow with an isolated 8-inch snow amount possible. And then lake effect snow will bring around a coating to a few inches of snow, but I don't think this will be anything in comparison to what we saw last year with Buffalo seeing over 3 feet of snow. I just don't think that's in the forecast. Travel impacts for tomorrow overall and even tonight, we are looking at moderate travel impacts in the orange shaded region. Yellow shaded region will be minor travel impacts, so even parts of western Massachusetts and northwest Pennsylvania, be mindful that snow could cause some travel impacts. And back into New York, you also will see some travel impacts there. Here's the future radar across the Midwest. We're really not looking at much today other than just some lake effect snow in Michigan. Again, it won't be anything too crazy. It will last for a while in some spots all the way through Monday, and then as we go into Tuesday evening, most of that clears out with maybe a little bit of snow going to Tuesday from another disturbance. But overall, snowfall totals from the lake effect snow not looking like anything too crazy. There might be an isolated spot that gets close to like 3 to 6 inches of snow, but again, that'd be very isolated. Elsewhere, maybe a coating to an inch if you're lucky. In terms of the rainfall totals on the East Coast, it's going to get pretty crazy. We're looking at a potential for flooding, especially back up into parts of southern New England where there's a chance for upwards of 2 to 5 inches of rain in some areas. There's actually moderate risk for excessive rainfall up there. But even across areas like Virginia and even the Carolinas, we'll be watching for some spots to pick upwards of 3 to 5 inches of rain down here as well. It'll be a lot more isolated down here than it will be in southern New England, but obviously make sure that you are turning around. Don't drown if you're on the roadways. Flooding will definitely become a concern tonight into tomorrow morning. In terms of the severe weather potential for today is Scary Storm Sunday, but overall I don't think these storms will be too scary. Overall, we do have a slight risk of severe weather for those in parts of eastern North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina, and then back down into Florida, a new slight risk of severe weather was added primarily for the early afternoon hours. The tornado risk is really one of the more concerning features of this. There will be a chance for a few tornadoes. We've already had multiple tornado warnings this morning. That'll continue into the afternoon hours, so if you're over in parts of North Carolina and back into parts of Florida, be mindful of that. Have a tornado action plan in place if you're anywhere in that risked area, and make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts. Now, for the timing, beginning with Virginia and North Carolina, these storms will be the ones to watch for during the afternoon, even a couple of coastal thunderstorms. But really what we're going to be watching for around 2 to 3 o'clock will be these supercells right here lining up from North Carolina back near Richmond. Those will have the best chance of producing an isolated tornado threat through the afternoon. By around 8 o'clock tonight, a lot of the severe weather threat's going to wind down. Daylight heating will end. Most of the rainfall will be what we're watching for. Maybe an isolated cell still being severe right along the North Carolina coast, but I think that threat will still stay overall low in those areas. Back over in South Carolina and Georgia, that's the same thing we're looking at. Really, any of these leading storms back over near Florence and Charleston will be the ones to watch for. Elsewhere, maybe an isolated storm back here that still produces an isolated threat of severe weather, but most of this will again just be rainfall with maybe some gusty winds as well. Back in Florida, most of the severe weather threat has already happened back over near Tallahassee, but as we go into the afternoon, we'll be looking at a really elongated area of storms here, stretching from again all the way up from southern Georgia back closer to Tampa by the afternoon. These will produce a threat for damaging winds as they move into Florida, and by the evening hours, these storms will continue to move to the east. Isolated tornado threat will still exist, but most of the threat will be damaging winds from here on out across most of Florida. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.